What's going on, everybody? Tom here with Black Sheep Keto, and welcome to another recipe video just for you subscribers out there. And if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider doing so. Now today I'm going to bring you guys a recipe for a delicious keto cracker. And the best way that I can describe the texture to you is that of a Ritz cracker. It's a little bit softer than a lot of crackers out there. It's buttery, flaky, but at the end of the day, it is delicious. Now these are great for topping with different meats or dips. The one thing I will say is if you get a real thick dip, you're not going to be able to scoop it. You're going to just break your cracker, but you can always spoon it right on top of there, kind of like you'd expect from a Ritz cracker. So if that sounds good to you guys, hang on tight and let's get right into the recipe. Alright everybody, welcome to this recipe for our delicious buttery flaky keto crackers. Now, laid out in front of me right here are all of the ingredients that we're going to be using in this recipe, both wet and dry, since there are so few of them. So let's go through and step through all of the ingredients before we start making this. Now right here, we have 1 cup of almond flour, 1.5 teaspoons of xanthan gum. I know some people will ask if this is necessary, and my answer typically goes along the lines of only if you want it to stay together. We have 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, which you can definitely add more later. Then we get to our wet ingredient side of things. We have 1/2 stick or 4 tablespoons of cold butter. Make sure it is cold, and I've just cubed it up into little pieces. And finally, 1/4 cup of heavy whipping cream. So that's all pretty much going into this, and it's going to be a very easy recipe. So first thing we're going to do is add everything on our dry ingredient side into this food processor. So we'll start with the almond flour, our salt, baking powder, and our xanthan gum. And then you're going to want to pulse your food processor just to kind of get everything nice and mixed together. So now that those ingredients are mixed together, and it also helps break up the clumps a little bit, we're gonna go ahead and start adding our wet ingredients. Now the first thing you're gonna add is your cold butter. And I just like to dump this straight on in there. Put your lid back on. And go ahead and pulse this until you see little kind of pea-shaped items forming. You don't want to go so far as to this is a smooth mixture. You want that kind of texture to the butter, but you want to get it pretty well mixed in there until you're getting like little BB or pea shapes. So I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's done. So right as you can see, it's starting to bind. You don't really want to go much further than that. We're going to go ahead and pour in our heavy whipping cream. Seal her back up and then pulse this until a nice ball forms. Alright guys, here's what it looks like after I've pulled it out of the food processor. As a note, if you took your butter too far, it might not form a nice ball when you pulse that cream in there, so you may have to scrape the edge of the food processor. The reason we want to leave some texture to the butter is it'll help produce that flaky texture of the crackers. But if you took it too far, it's not really a big deal. Just scrape it out with a rubber scraper and form a ball on a piece of parchment paper. So this is what's going to form our crackers right here, and we're going to want to form it into about an 1/8 of an inch thick sheet of dough before we start cutting it. Now what I like to do is I like to line it with another sheet of parchment paper over the top, then take a cutting board and push down. Let me get that set up and I'll show you guys real quick. So I do have my parchment paper and my cutting board set up over here, but one thing I will note is I don't want this to be a giant circle, I want it to be more rectangular. So we're gonna make kind of a snake out of this dough before we press it. Perfect. Now we'll go ahead and cover it in the other sheet of parchment paper. Put your cutting board down and just apply even pressure. Now yes, you can do this with a rolling pin, but I like making life easier on me. So now you guys should see here what it looks like after you've pressed it with a cutting board. That just gives us a really nice consistent thickness through the whole thing. Now normally I would do it on a hard surface, but I have to put this tablecloth down, otherwise you get really bad glare from the lights. So we just went ahead and worked with it as such. So now what you're going to do is peel off this top layer of parchment paper. If you notice it's sticking, go ahead and stick it in the fridge for a little bit. This stuff will get a little bit soft as the butter melts. So work quickly or just pop it in the fridge from time to time if you notice it getting really sticky. So now it's time to cut our crackers. I'm probably going to do about 4 rows this way and then probably about 1/2 an inch this way. Should do the trick, but cut them whatever shape you really want. If you're obsessed with like a perfectly rectangular cracker, you can go ahead and cut these ends off like so, but I don't really care. Now, as you can see, mine is starting to stick a little bit, and that's just because I've been spending way too much time doing this, trying to get the cameras done. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in the fridge for a minute and come back and cut it a little bit further. Alright guys, I just put this in the refrigerator or freezer for about 3 to 5 minutes and it'll firm up again. Normally you won't have this problem, but again, because of the production lights and the amount of time it takes to film, it can soften up a little bit. And if yours does that, just pop in the fridge or freezer, no big deal. Anyway, now it's time to cut the actual crackers out of it. And then what I like to do is to take a fork and just kind of pop some holes in each cracker. That stops it from getting really big bubbles in it when you bake them. So now that your crackers are cut and perforated, we're actually gonna put this back in the refrigerator or freezer while we preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason that this is going back in your fridge or freezer is just to make it easier to pull them off of the parchment paper here, and we're gonna transfer them to another cookie sheet. But for now, just get this in your fridge or freezer and then preheat your oven to 350 Fahrenheit, and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, our preheat timer just went off, so we are gonna take our crackers right here and transfer them onto this parchment paper lined baking sheet. You can totally recycle the parchment paper that we used earlier if you wanna do so. Anyway, since these have been in the fridge or freezer, they should pop off pretty easily. You can use a fork or your fingers just to kind of pop them off, break them if you have to, and set them on the tray, spaced out about 1/4 inch apart. Now, some of these little tiny pieces I probably won't use, but you guys can do a more, I don't know, creative shape if you want to use every last bit of dough. In any case, let me get that done, and I'll check up with you guys right before we pop them in the oven. So now that I have these on my cookie sheet, we're gonna pop them in that 350 degree Fahrenheit oven for between 10 and 12 minutes. If they're touching a little bit, they will get sealed together, so just make sure that there's about 1/4 inch between all of them. If you have any leftovers that you're gonna have to make a second batch with, make sure you store these in the fridge or freezer until you're ready to use them. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to peel it off of that sheet. But with that, guys, I'm gonna go and stuck this in the freezer for 10 to 12 minutes, and why don't you guys check out our finished product right here, and then let's get right into the taste test. Well, guys, now that you've seen the recipe and the finished product, it is time for the taste test. Now, I do have a few of my crackers sitting right over here. Now you'll notice that the edges are just starting to brown, and that's about the point where you want to pull them out. When I say 10 to 12 minutes, that's about when it'll happen, but if you're a little thinner or a little thicker on your crackers, just keep an eye on them. And one other thing that I forgot to mention is if you wanted to put any like garlic salt or anything like that on these crackers as a topper, go ahead and just sprinkle it on right before you put it in the oven. But with that, let's get right to the taste test. Now I think I'm going to put a little bit of Swiss and a little bit of salami on mine for this particular taste test. Looks pretty good to me. Now let's give it a bite. Now that is absolutely delicious, guys. It is crispy, it is buttery, it's a little bit salty, and that's exactly what we're aiming for with this recipe. It does a really good job of replacing a Ritz cracker. Now if you're trying to replace something like a Clubhouse cracker, they're gonna be a little bit softer than that, but that's all right. These things are absolutely delicious, and for topping with meats or dips, they are perfect. It's a good alternative to like pork rinds or cheese crisps for those of you guys who are getting kind of tired of that like I do from time to time. But anyways, guys, the macros and recipe for this are going to be down in the description. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section. And if you have not subscribed yet, do me a huge favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button, show some love, and I will see you in the next one.